Hello everyone, thanks for tuning in to today's second video. We're going to have a look at the weather for the next week to 10 days for today's second video, which will take us to around the 22nd of February. So you can have very mild conditions coming up this week. High pressure is going to be well and truly in control. You're going to be pulling up southerly winds. So I think by Friday we could be looking at temperatures up to around 14 or 15 degrees Celsius into southern and eastern parts of the country. That is spring-like sort of temperature levels. They'll probably fall back a little bit over the weekend, but staying quite mild. And then we'll see where things are forecast to go by the GFS, the ECM and the GEM as we look ahead through to next week and up to the 10-day time frame. Just to say that the ECM 30-day update has been released for the UK and for Europe this morning, as always on a Tuesday. So that one takes us into the first half of March. Looks like we're going to be keeping things pretty mild, actually, as we're going into March with the ECMWF. But have a look at that and see what's going on. I'm going to start off with the Arctic Oscillation, North Atlantic Oscillation observed and forecast charts. Just a few signs that things are starting to move a little bit with the AO and the NAO. So the black line here tells us where we've been with the Arctic Oscillation. The red line's at the end where the GFS ensembles are forecasting the Arctic Oscillation to go. It's just an index that's reflecting the state of the atmosphere. It's not driving anything. Just tells you what the atmosphere is doing. So when the Arctic Oscillation is negative, you're going to have high pressure somewhere within the northern latitudes. You have high latitude blocking. And high latitude blocking is a route pushing cold air out of the pole and down into the mid latitudes. Of course, it's not a guarantee that the UK in particular will be cold or very cold from blocking, because it's where that blocking is sitting that's the important factor. So you can be on the mild side of the block as well as on the cold side of the block. So a negative Arctic Oscillation is not a guarantee of cold in any one particular area, but it is one of the things that we look at that does tend to coincide with the coldest spells both in the UK and more widely across the Northern Hemisphere. Now, when the Arctic Oscillation is positive, you can have low pressure up over the pole. So you keep the cold air bottled in over the North Pole, and you'll typically strengthen, this time of year anyway, you'll strengthen the zonal westerlies. So you get low pressure around Iceland, and you'll get high pressure in the Azores. It will tend to go along with a positive NAO as well. We'll talk about that in a moment. Now, at the moment, the Arctic Oscillation is very positive indeed, in very positive territory. This is the most positive that it's been throughout the winter. So you can actually go back to October with this chart. That's where we was in the middle of October, for example, with the Arctic Oscillation on the positive side. Really, since November, the Arctic Oscillation has been trending quite negative. So the Arctic Oscillation is really negative going up to the beginning of December. Through the first half of December, for about a week, it did go a little bit more positive. And then generally the trend through December and into January has been negative with the AO. So this will probably turn out to be a negative AO winter. That said, where we are right now, the Arctic Oscillation is very, very positive indeed. We're up here, and that is a really positive level to be at. It looks like we're going to stay very positive with the AO, certainly for the next week, going into the second half of February. But you'll notice a lot of these GFS ensemble members are then moving the Arctic Oscillation back into negative territory again. So most of the GFS ensemble members are going down to there. This is in week 2, so it's in the unreliable time frame, both of the GFS model and its ensemble. But most of those ensemble members are moving the Arctic Oscillation down back into negative territory. And there are a few, there are outliers undoubtedly, but there are a few that are really dropping the Arctic Oscillation into very negative territory. They are doing a plummet off the cliff as we go towards the end of February. I think discount those more dramatic looking ones for the time being and concentrate on the general trend, which is positive with the AO over the next week to 10 days, but then from around days 10 to 14 looks like we're going to go quite negative again with the Arctic Oscillation. Again, bear in mind this is unreliable. It's in the unreliable phase of a GFS and its ensembles, but that's certainly the trend today. So positive AO for next week 10 days, and then perhaps trending negative. Now, throughout this winter, the North Atlantic oscillation has tended to be in its positive phase. So again, this chart tells us where we've been with the NAO and where the GFS ensembles are forecasting the NAO to go. The black line shows where we've been, red lines at the end where the GFS ensembles are forecasting the NAO to go. So since December, we've basically been in a positive phase of the North Atlantic oscillation. So you can see through the first half of December, for example, dates on there. You see through the first half of December, the NAO was quite positive. It went closer to neutral in the second half of December, but still on the positive side. Just very briefly, for a few days around the new year, we went negative with the NAO, but then back positive again. Through January into February, the NAO has been trending positive. Where we actually are right now is close to neutral, but on the positive side. It looks like we're going to stay neutral to positive over the next week. But there is a definite trend within the GFS ensembles to start moving this in towards more negative territory as we go through the final sort of week or so of February. It looks like it's a very slow, gradual trend. It's certainly not a plummet off the cliff like we saw with some of those ensemble members for the AO. It's nothing overly dramatic, but there is definitely a downwards trend in the North Atlantic oscillation taking place here as we're moving towards the end of the month. And the GFS ensembles do more or less get us to the end of February now. So, putting it together, it looks as though by the end of February we could well have both the AO and the NAO for the first time in months. We could both have them going into negativity. That would be quite interesting because it would imply there's a fairly big pattern change going on there, because remember, it's always the pattern that's driving the index. So there's got to be some sort of fairly substantial change within the overall sort of synoptic pattern that the GFS and its ensembles are picking up on to be able to push both the AO and the NAO potentially into negative territory for the end of February. Now, all I'd say is that this is right at the very extended range of the GFS and its ensembles. It's like a couple of weeks away. So, obviously, it is subject to a big health warning. But it is fairly strong trend that we're seeing there with the two indexes both seemingly going into negative territory by the end of February. It could imply some fairly dramatic changes perhaps by month's end. We'll certainly have to keep a close eye on it. GFS upper air temperatures and precipitation ensembles for Biggin Hill today. So Biggin Hill is in the London borough of Bromley, and it's another place in the suggested locations for this section of the video that you've been giving us for your suggestions. We're going through the list now, so in a day or so I'll ask you to start resubmitting some of your locations, your favourite towns and cities for this section of the video. But we're looking at Biggin Hill today. So red line here is the 30-year upper air temperature average for Biggin Hill. And obviously going to be very mild over the next week, so temperatures are on the up from today, almost already above average with your upper air temperatures today, but they're going to carry on rising through this week. As I say, we could well be seeing temperatures down on the surface getting up to around 15 or 16 degrees potentially by the end of the week. Into the weekend and early next week, the temperatures are lowering. Not going cold, not even going colder than average, but certainly lowering from this very high level. Because it's only February, we can't keep the temperature at that sort of very high level for very long at this time of year. So the temperatures will lower, they'll drop back, but even so, probably still above average even into the early part of next week. That takes us through to the final week or so of February. That's the 20th of February just there. Let me see, the end of February just here, the 28th is just there. You'll see, again, the trend within the GFS ensembles is to keep temperatures above average. Most of these ensemble members are trending on the milder side of average in that sort of zone. There are several very striking and really quite dramatic cold outliers, though, that are within the GFS ensembles now. Of course, all the way along through this winter, really, we've always had an extended range like 2, 3 really cold outliers within the GFS ensembles. On most days we've had that. Never really verifying. Got a few more of those really cold outliers though today. So we've got one just there. We've got another one just here. That's the coldest one, really. We've got this blue coloured line, which is actually the GFS control run. And I will show you about in a moment how that is pulling off such a depth of cold. It's almost going down to minus 15 Celsius at 850 HPA. So we've got those ones just there. And then towards the end, there's actually a few more appearing. There's these green ones just here, and that gold one just there. So there are several GFS ensemble members that are plummeting into potentially very cold or almost freezer type levels. Again, they're outliers and they're occurring at different periods. So these are outliers just here for the period from around the 20th to the 24th or 25th of February. And then these ones are outliers for kind of like the 26th through to 28th of February. So they're occurring at different intervals within the final week of February. But I suppose if you was to put those four together that you got just there, and then combine them with these ones that happened a little bit later on, then actually probably quite a few of these GFS ensembles are pulling off some really quite cold weather in the final days of February. That could tie in with what we're just looking at with the Arctic and North Atlantic oscillation indexes on the move. But again, do bear in mind that most of these ensemble members are up here. Most of these ensemble members are keeping things mild, or potentially even very mild, as we're going into the final week of February. So it all remains to be seen, really. But it's interesting how the GFS ensembles of air temperatures are moving a little bit. There's quite a few cold outliers starting to appear at the same time as the Arctic and North Atlantic oscillation indexes are beginning to shift a bit as well. Now, as far as precipitation is concerned, loads of dry weather coming up over the next week through to the weekend, then gradually turning more unsettled through to month's end. But you have to say that's a very dry ensemble for what is still like the winter. So the dry winter of 2018-19 goes on. Temperature anomalies from the 12th through to 20th of February are coming out milder than average of UK and Ireland. Most of Europe is coming out milder than average as well. Precipitation anomalies very dry. So mild, dry, high pressure dominated weather continues from the 12th through to the 20th of February. Very little rain, actually no rain probably down in the south and southeast at all in the next week, which is quite unusual, of course, to say the least. Right, so this is how the 6 o'clock GFS run is looking, and we see that we're starting off on Friday. We've got high pressure sitting across Central Europe. We're pulling up these mild to very mild southerly winds. Temperatures could be up to mid-teens Celsius. Over the weekend, very mild on Saturday. Showery rain in the north and west, but many eastern parts of the country staying dry. And certainly if this low pressure gets a little bit closer, it may bring a band of rain across the country. I suspect if it does, the rain will fizzle out, but it will lower the temperature. So we saw that on the ensemble just there, but the very warm temperatures, very mild temperatures, will gradually start to lower as we go through the weekend and into the start of next week. That's what's happening there, this low pressure, just getting that bit closer, pulling the wind in from more of the central and northern Atlantic as opposed to southern parts of Europe, and so that's how the temperature lowers down, but it's still above average. It's still Atlantic drift, which is going to be mild in February, or will typically be mild in February. That's how things look as going to start of next week. So we're into this westerly flow, bringing showers along with spells of rain into the north. Very quickly, though, we're getting back into high pressure. So this is Wednesday, 20th of February. The ridge is building up from France once again, heading back into the UK. And then off we go again, running up to day 10 with high pressure dominating. There's a big ridge there sitting across the UK and many central parts of Europe. And notice that ridge is moving northwards. It's trying to ridge up towards Iceland, Greenland and Scandinavia. Let's see how successful it is. This takes us a little bit beyond day 10 to Saturday the 23rd of February. High pressure is in there over the UK and to our east. The wind is kind of like south to southeasterly, which isn't going to be overly mild. That could actually be quite chilly. That could be quite a chilly wind moving in from the east. The upper air temperatures would still be mild, but it's a continental flow. It's only February, so that would probably bring a return to night frost. So high pressure goes a little bit further north still. By the time you get through to Sunday, 24th of February, the centre of that high pressure at 1,025 millibars is actually between Iceland and Norway. So it's quite a long way north now, that high pressure. If it was to go much further north than that, let's say that's where the high pressure is centred just there. But if that high pressure is to go up to there, so it's centred between Greenland and the north of Norway, then you would start to push much colder air out from the northeast. With this high pressure pushing northwards, that is probably what is sending the Arctic Oscillation negative in this sort of phase of the GFS ensemble. So that's probably the reason why the Arctic Oscillation is starting to move into their negative territory, because this high pressure is ridging further northwards. That's how we go into a very extended range. So we're almost pulling in cold easterly winds now. This is Tuesday, 26th of February. It's a southeasterly that we've got here. The coldest of the air is on the back of this high pressure. It's down through there. But again, if we just take that high pressure a little bit further northwards, then we will start to back that cold air into the west of Europe. So it's almost pulling in cold air, but not quite. But that will be a chilly southeasterly. It will certainly bring night frost. And actually, by the end of this 6 o'clock run of the GFS, we do tilt the wind round into the east. So we eventually, it's 384 hours away, so I mean, it's very unreliable. It's a final day of February, but we are pulling in an easterly wind at this point, and there's the upper air temperatures, so not particularly cold at that point with the upper air temperatures, but there is a lot of cold air sitting to our east and northeast. Obviously, if we keep those easterly winds going for 2 or 3 days, we would start to push that cold air out of the northeast of Europe. That's an indication of why the Arctic Oscillation and probably Northern Atlantic Oscillations are shifting as we're looking at that charts, the charts that take us to the end of the month. This is how the parallel GFS run is looking. So again, we've got winds coming up from the south on Friday, very mild, balmy spring-like conditions. That goes on into the weekend. This low pressure not quite as far into the UK for next weekend. So I'd probably say very mild over the weekend with a parallel GFS run. Eventually it turns a little bit cooler though, early next week. Still mild though, still above average temperatures, and high pressure continues to be dominating the weather. Running up to day 10, the high pressure is ridging through the UK with the parallel GFS run, and it is beginning to try and move itself that little bit further north once again. So we'll go beyond day 10 to more extended range, and that high pressure then is centering itself to the northeast of Scotland. And that's how we look as we move into a very extended range with a parallel GFS run. So we're shifting the wind gradually from very mild southerly, is what we start off with, to almost like an easterly by the time we get through to the 26th of February. It's not a cold easterly though. The air, although the wind is easterly, the wind is coming in from the east into the UK like that. The origins of the air is like south of east, so the origins of the air is actually coming from the Mediterranean, from Italy, pushing northwards and then being pushed eastwards. So that would be a very mild easterly wind that we got there, although it wouldn't necessarily feel it. It'd be dragging in a lot of cloud, it'd dragging light rain, drizzly bits, pieces, probably mist and fog for eastern coastal counties as well, so it will feel pretty miserable. But for an easterly, because the air mass is kind of like coming up from Italy, be a relatively mild easterly flow. That's how we look at the end of a parallel GFS run. So high pressure is still there to our northeast. Winds are from the southeast, with the air originating again from southern parts of Europe. So it's kind of like a mild easterly, but probably feeling pretty cold and miserable underneath that east wind. But having said that, the upper air temperatures do actually drag in a little bit of cold air with those southeasterly winds. Now this is that control member of the GFS ensemble. So I showed you about a few moments ago, within the GFS ensembles we've got one member which was the blue member. That thick blue member there is the GFS control run, which is run at a higher resolution to most ensemble members but at a lower resolution compared to the operational and the parallel. I'll just show you how it's producing that very cold weather. So again, we start off on Friday, bringing up these very mild southerly winds. Into the weekend, it turns more unsettled and a little bit cooler as well, although probably still milder than average. Into next week, just a little bit more unsettled once again. But in the middle of next week, we start to get this ridge building out of the north. So up to now, the GFS Operation Parallel runs have been building a ridge up from the south into the UK through the second half of next week, which does eventually go north in the extended range, but it's building up from the south, so it's relatively mild ridge. The control is doing something different. It's building the ridge down from the north. So the ridge is originating from around Greenland and Iceland, pushing southwards into the UK. And this starts to pull down much colder air from the north and from the northeast as well. There's the upper air temperatures at day 10, Friday 22nd of February. The minus 10 Celsius ice firm is moving into the UK, so bitterly cold air is moving out of the northeast into the UK. That's how things look on Saturday the 23rd of February. High pressure is dominating to the north of Scotland. We've got bitterly cold easterly winds flooding in across the country. They will almost certainly be bringing snow showers to southern and eastern parts of the country. There's the upper air temperatures. That is kind of like big freeze type levels. You would have daytime temperatures below freezing all day with those upper air temperatures underneath minus 10, and you would have severe night frost. You would have snow coming off the North Sea as well into southern and eastern areas. In the extended range, then, the controlled GFS takes that high pressure up to Greenland and starts to pull down cold air from the north with low pressure as well. So this will be snow developing widely across the country. That's how it finishes on the final day of February. Bitterly cold, low pressures over the top of the country. There'll be widespread and heavy snow in many parts of the country. And winds have gone from easterlies to northerlies as the upper air temperatures showing that. We've got really cold air sitting to our north, waiting to flood southwards on those northerly winds. Now, that is a big outlier. So, again, go back to the ensemble graph, Biggin Hill. That is a big outlier indicated by that blue member. But there are a few GFS ensemble members at various points in extended range that are doing something like that, bringing down very cold air. So we do need to keep a close watch on what's happening here for the final week of February and perhaps into the start of March. GEM is looking like that. This is a Canadian model, so very mild southerly winds on the 15th, Friday, into next weekend. Just turning a bit more unsettled and slightly cooler from the Atlantic. So next week again, we've got low pressure, so gently unsettled for the early part of next week. Then by Wednesday, the ridge is building back up. This time, though, notice again in line with what the GFS parallel and operational runs are doing, the ridge is building up from the south. It's a relatively mild ridge that's building up from the south and would initially bring quite mild conditions. That's how we look at day 10. Winds are kind of right southerly to southeasterly with a ridge just to our east and low pressure out to the west. And then the ECMWF, we've got winds coming up from the south once again on Friday, and then we go through into the weekend, gradually turning things more unsettled, a bit cooler through to start of next week. Very quickly, we go back into high pressure again, though. By the time we get through to day 10, the high pressure is dominating the weather across central parts of Europe. Not a particularly mild area of high pressure this time. The flow is continental as opposed to coming up from southern Europe, so at the very least that will probably produce some quite hard frost, although the sun is getting stronger very quickly now by day, so in the sunshine probably relatively mild by day, but by night that would be enough to see a return to night frost, but not going anywhere near as far north with that ridge as some of the GFS ensemble members are showing. So looks like I'm going to very quickly get back to high pressure next week, but it will be a cooler high pressure, I think. It will probably bring a return to frost, and then as we get through to the final week of February, we wait and see where that high pressure is going to go. Finally, just having a look at the charts from the Icelandic Met Office for the ECMWF ensembles. These are the various options that are on the table for day 10, which is the 22nd of February. So we've got 28 members of the ECM ensembles with this area of above average heights over the UK, and to our east they're bringing up a lot of dry weather and quite mild southerly winds too. Then we've got 15, including the operational run, the run we were just looking at, but at day 10 have high pressure dominating over and just slightly to the east and northeast of us. So these are a cooler option. Some of them could be quite cold, but let's say a cooler option with a wind coming in more or less from an easterly direction. So quite continental, certainly enough to bring a return to frost with those. And then there's 8 ensemble members that have a high pressure centred over Germany, and they're bringing up mild southerly to southwesterly winds, rather like that. And then in 2 weeks' time, which takes us to 360 hours, it's the 27th of February, we have 23 members of the ECM ensembles with high pressure to our northeast, so these are bringing in quite cold easterly winds, and they do include the control run of the ECM ensembles. Then there's another 22 that have high pressure over and just slightly to our southeast, so they're bringing up a milder sort of southerly southwesterly flow. And then there's 6 that are taking the high pressure up towards Greenland. We also have a ridge down to our south. They've got low pressure in the Atlantic there and to our east, so they're very messy. There would be probably a weather front that's strung out through the country. They could actually be quite unsettled. They're trying to pull up mild air from the south, but also trying to bring cold air down from the north, so those ones could produce rain, potentially even snow, depending on whether mild or cold air has the ascendancy. There's only 6 of those, though. So we can say that we're going to keep the anticyclonic signals going for quite some time. Very mild this week, a little bit more unsettled, just gently unsettled over the weekend, and particularly into the first couple of days of next week. Very quickly, though, next week we go back to high pressure again, by the look of it. This time a slightly cooler high pressure, though, probably bringing a return to night frost. And then that takes us to around the last week of February. It's the last week of February, but we've got to be watching where that high pressure goes. Does it just continue to sit around the country and continue to bring relatively cool conditions, night frost, but nothing too dramatic? Does it move south and start to drag up much milder air, again, much milder winds from the south? Or does it finally start to go north? And that's what I've been waiting for all winter. Does this high pressure finally start to go north, get itself to Scandinavia or Iceland or Greenland, and start to bring us much colder winds from the north and the east for the end of the month, and probably taking us into start of March? All will be revealed in the days ahead. It does look as though the Arctic and North Atlantic oscillations are picking up on some sort of pattern shift for the final week of February, but what that pattern shift is and what it means for us is going to take a little while to decipher. Right, so all is not lost if you want some colder weather before the end of the winter. But obviously, we are running down the clock to the end of winter, and it gets harder and harder day by day the further on we go into February to pull off significant cold weather. And after last February was so very cold at the end of February and start of March with the beach to the east, it would be highly unlikely and truly remarkable to get that to happen 2 years running at around the same time frame. So I would suspect those very cold winds from the north and northeast are unlikely, but they can't be ruled out. We'll keep you posted over the next few days. Tomorrow we've got the 5-day forecast. We'll also bring you up to date with the week to 10-day outlook as well. That's all for now, though, and thanks for watching.